Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
You can support this podcast on patreon.com/First Paw Media. Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to search for our show on Apple Podcast, Google, and more. And I am joined today by my co-host, Tony Ryder, calling in from Kenai, Alaska. Tony, how's it going tonight?
Going pretty well. I'm missing the sunshine. It's been gray and gloomy here the last couple of days. I'm starting to feel like the weather is choosing to be nasty on my days off and bright and beautiful and warm on the days that I have to be in the office.
Well, one thing is for sure, the snow is definitely melting quick. I think we just have a little bit of the white stuff left over here in Willow, and I'm sure most of it is probably gone down in your area. But boy, I tell you what, it's going to be fishing season before you know it, and it's going to take on a whole new world down there on the peninsula in the summer, doesn't it?
It does. We're already seeing it. The snowbirds have returned, so that means there's no parking at Fred Meyer already.
Yes, it does get busy. I try to only make it down to that neck of the woods for about a week a year, but otherwise it's a beautiful area. So for folks that are listening, they're probably wondering, why in the world are we talking about fishing in Alaska? Tonight we're talking all about Tony and what she is and what she's all about. She is our new co-host here on Mushing Radio. She is not new to the show, however. She was our guest or our co-host guest last year, 2021, for our Iditarod coverage, and she and I did this year's Iditarod coverage in pretty good fashion. We had more downloads than we've ever had, a heck of a lot of back and forth on social media. It was a great time, so I'm looking forward to having Tony on as a regular co-host here in the off season, and of course, hopefully, as we move into the mushing season and Iditarod next year, she will be along for the ride. So, Tony, before we get into these 10 questions, can you just give our listeners a brief bio about who you are and what you're all about, please?
Brief. Okay. I was born and raised in South Central Alaska. Started off in Anchorage, but basically grew up on the Kenai Peninsula. I am a photographer, freelance. I'd love to be more professional in that neck of the woods, but I've got to pay the bills. So I'm also the volunteer coordinator and administrative assistant of the volunteer hospice down here on the peninsula, which we service everywhere from Cooper Landing to Ninilchik, Funny River to Nikiski and all points in between. So I keep busy that way with the nonprofit. In college, I thought I wanted to get into journalism and then realized I didn't like talking to people enough to actually do that and do it well. So I've just been kind of jumping around at different jobs trying to see where it fits. And hospice seems to be where I have done the most good. I did work for an Iditarod champion sled dog kennel in my summer months of college. So that's really how I got super involved with the sport outside of volunteering for Iditarod every year. And that's kind of how my passion into photographing sled dogs and blogging about sled dogs really took off. Before I was just a casual fan, and now I'm a little bit obsessive.
And you are a podcast host. I don't know if you will become a professional podcast host where you can quit your real job. I'm still trying to do that a decade later, but you can definitely add that to your resume. And it's interesting you said that you were going into school to be in journalism, but you didn't like to talk to people. But here on the podcast, you're really just talking to me, but you're talking to a heck of a lot of people, but you're really just talking into a mic right now. Isn't that right?
Pretty much. And it's pretty intense for me. I have a little bit of social anxiety that I mean, I'm self-diagnosed. I really shouldn't say that I have it, but all the signs are there. So this was a huge stepping off for me last year when Alex twisted my arm, and then this year when you asked me to come back. I really enjoy it. I love talking about mushing and Iditarod and all of that. So that pretty much is the only way that it really felt natural to do this. I wouldn't do this on my own though.
Very good. So for longtime listeners, whether you are a Mushing Radio fan or a Dogworks Radio fan, you know we interview a heck of a lot of people over the years. We've interviewed a lot of professional mushers. We've interviewed filmmakers, actors, you name it, we've interviewed them, but we have never come up with a list of questions. The way I typically interview my guests is I just ask one question, they respond to the answer, and then I'll ask another question in a very laid back conversational tone. But I thought it would be interesting today to have a set of questions that'll take a little bit of thought on Toni's part. I did not send them to her earlier. I mentioned them to her around lunchtime today. I said, hey, do you want this list ahead of time or you just want to roll with it? And she said, let's just roll with it. So she has no idea of the questions I'm going to ask, and I think it's going to be fun that way. We have 10 of them, and let's jump into them. The first one is a mushing question. Not all of these are mushing related questions, even though this is a mushing podcast, but our goal is to let our listeners know a little bit about who Toni is and what she's all about. So number one is a mushing question, and it is, do you have any mushing superstitions?
I definitely do. I think I jinx anybody I pick. So yeah, there's some superstition right there. I definitely don't openly cheer for any of the teams that I really want to see do well. Some of that is because mushers over the years have asked me not to, Rob Cook being one of the most vocal ones saying not to because of my jinxing abilities. But that started even before that. It was kind of a joke when I was working with Dallas CV. I had mentioned that it didn't matter what sport it was. If I cheered for that team, if I cheered for that individual, they didn't do well. So he was like, just promise you'll never cheer for me if I run Iditarod again. So that was, almost 15 years ago. And I've it's always in the back of my mind. So there are teams that I really, really like and that I definitely report on and talk about. But as far as like, yes, go, yeah, I don't do that, because when I do that, they don't win. And sometimes they don't even finish.
And a little bit of backstory here. One of the things that we do every year on our kickoff show is to pick our top 5. And we do that. And I always put Alex and Toni on the spot because of this particular reason. And we do it, and we never say who's going to be the champion. We always say, who's your top 5? Who's your rookie of the year? That way nothing is jinxed. So here we go. Number 2. Are you ready?
I think so.
All right. So TV show guilty pleasure, just one.
This one's going to be hard because I'm a little bit of a TV nerd. I think the one that I come back to all the time is the TV show MASH, which is a little bit before my time, but I watched it in reruns growing up. And so it's just kind of not necessarily the guilty pleasure, but it's definitely the comfort TV show. It never ceases to be funny, and it's still relevant even all these decades later, even maybe more so now than it was during the Vietnam War, if that's possible. So yeah, it's definitely shaped my sense of humor as well. I watched a lot of very sarcastic television when I was a kid, and it warped me.
It did. And speaking of Mish, it warped me too. That was the answer I was looking for. It did warp us all. So speaking of MASH, Tony, who is your favorite character on the show?
I grew up loving BJ Honeycutt, but now as I'm older, I'm definitely more of a, fan of Hawkeye Pierce. But my boss actually calls me Radar O'Reilly because she swears I know what she needs or I hear stuff before she does. But to be fair, she's deaf in one ear. So I think that that's why she doesn't hear it, not necessarily because I'm like supersonic hearing or anything like that.
All right, here we go. Number 3. A mushing question. If you were in charge of the Iditarod, what is one thing you would change?
Oh, their PR.
Okay.
I hesitate to be too judgmental about it, but definitely I think we're seeing a little bit more, especially with social media, a little more of the oopses. And I don't think that they're huge other than with social media, people can glomp on so quickly. And so I think they just need to be a little more transparent that way. I don't think they need to change things up too much, but these things like Musher X or stuff that just comes off sounding scandalous, knock that off. That's just shooting yourselves in the foot.
All right, very good. Number 4, what is your most valued material possession?
I don't think my dog counts, but I kind of feel like that would be the easy answer at this point. My most, I would have to say, can I say like my camera gear? And I know that that's more than one item, but really without all of it together, it doesn't work as well as it needs to. So I definitely would say that my camera body and especially my 70 to 200 millimeter zoom lens. If I had to only pick one lens, that would be probably the one that I'd grab and run with, just because it's the most versatile of what I have.
And are you a Canon, Nikon, Sony, what?
Oh, I'm definitely a Canon girl, born and raised Canon. So.
Very good. All right, here we go. So we are on number 5. What is something no one would guess about you?
I don't know. That one's hard. Maybe I should have had you send me these questions because there's going to be a lot of dead air here. I don't know if a lot of people know that I daydream and I dream big a lot. I know that I don't share a lot of my hopes and dreams, I guess because I'm worried that I'm going to jinx them, but I'm a big picture, big dreamer. I just don't ever execute it.
All right. So that may fall into the next 2, which has to do with famous.
Uh-oh.
So number 6 is who, in terms of a famous person, would you compare yourself to?
I have no idea. Oh my word. That's just, can I say pass?
Of course. Yes.
Okay, good. Because I have no idea.
Okay.
No idea who I would be.
All right. Well, think about that one for a minute. Maybe you'll come back to that one at the end of the show. So let's go on to number 7. These are definitely more big picture, exocentric type of questions, these famous ones. So what are you famous for?
Well, on Twitter right now, with everybody tagging me in videos of bears, I think I'm famous for wanting to hug a bear. But I think what I get most noticed for, at least in like the mushing circles and stuff, is my photography. I'm not a Jeff Schultz. I'm never going to be a Jeff Schultz. I would love to be, but the skill that he has, a lot of it has to do with jumping out of airplanes and stuff, and that's just never going to happen for me. But I definitely think that I'm most known for my photography work. I've been published in several major publications and national television. So I guess that would be the one.
So for folks that don't know, what makes a photographer a photographer? You always hear that they have the eye for it, or could be the gear. It could be, how long they sit in a particular position and wait for something to happen? Is it a combination of, or what makes your photography stand out compared to, the average person that's taking photography of or photographs of dog teams?
Jeff Schultz always says, F8 and be there. So, it does take a little bit of knowledge and skill. There are more skilled photographers than I am shooting. And they're the ones that are going out on the Iditarod Trail and going out on some of the other races. I've been an official photographer for races. It's a lot of work and it's fast turnaround, and that's something that I'm not as good at as some of the other photographers. But as far as what makes a photographer, you just got to be there. You've got to be willing to do more than just point and shoot and have the camera do everything for you. But even then, if you're telling a story with your photos, even if you don't really know the mechanics behind it, you are a type of photographer.
And this is the second time you've brought up photography in these questions. And we asked what type of gear you had, and you said you were a Canon person. Can you share a very quick part of the story that you mentioned on the Iditarod podcast this year? You're up at the restart, and everything was going well, and then you got home and you figured out that you may have lost the SD card. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Oh, the most traumatic day of my life. Not really, but one of them. So I was out there all day at the restart there on Willow Lake, and got back to the hotel room in Anchorage, which is a bit of a drive. So it wasn't like I could turn around and go back. But I went to upload the pictures to my laptop so that I could at least start looking and deciding if anything needed to be posted right away. And I realized that the SD card that had the stuff from the morning, of the getting ready, of most of the teams, including the top names, that I was going to use those photos on my blog. They were the SD card was missing. I tore apart my bag. I tore apart my jacket and all of my gear. I tore apart my dad's gear. My dad even went down because I was starting to panic. So he goes down. It's like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and he's down in the dark trying to find stuff in the truck, thinking maybe it just fell to pieces, and nothing. And I just finally gave up. I was like, nope, I just lost it. It's going to be at the bottom of the lake come spring when the ice melts, and I can't believe I did that. And then it hit me as I was getting ready for bed that, wait, I had it in my pocket, the same pocket as my lens cap. What if it somehow stuck to the inside of the lens cap and it's in between my lens and that cap? So I popped the cap off, and there it was, and it was the biggest miracle. It was an Iditarod miracle. It was bigger than Christmas. It was fantastic. And it's almost like when in the film era, if people are familiar with film cameras anymore, if you had opened up the back of your camera and the light had hit before winding your film, and so the light has hit, and now all of your film is ruined. That's the kind of gut punch feeling that it was. And I was very near tears, and instead of crying, I just got angry and was probably very rude to my dad most of the night. So it's no wonder he went digging for it in his truck. But yeah, it was not a good night, and then it was a really great night.
I remember those days of opening up your camera and developing your film if you did not rewind it. So, Tony, going back to superstitions, that first question that I asked you, I know that a lot of technical people, whether they're photographers or people that do things with their hands, put things in particular spots every time. You may put your knife in your front right pocket, or your headlamp in your top Parker pocket, or something like that. Do you do something like that with your SD cards or your equipment to make sure that it's always there every single time, just to inhibit things like this that could occur? Or are you going to start doing something like that now?
I probably should, but I almost guarantee that I won't. I kind of do things just by memory. And so I always, the lens cap always goes in my front jacket pocket, or if I don't have that, in my hoodie pouch. Typically my SD cards go in a second pocket. But during Iditarod, I only have so many pockets, and I don't like digging through several layers to put those SD cards where I normally would. In hindsight, I probably should have this year, but it was a weird, warm day out there on the lake, and so I wasn't wearing the gear that I typically do out there. So, I think I'll just, from now on, double check and triple check the lens cap before I put it back on the lens.
Very good. All right, here we go. Next question. What website do you visit the most often?
It's either Twitter or Facebook, probably. They have the best memes. But outside of that, I definitely, I spend a lot of time on my photography gallery, the smugmug.com. When I'm not doing stuff with my own photography, I'm looking at other people's galleries to kind of get inspired. So that's one of the big ones. And then for work, there's a couple of different hospice and end of life type blogs that I read.
All right, number 9. This is a 3-parter. You can pick whichever one suits you best. What is your most memorable, your most satisfying win, or your most miserable defeat?
Most memorable, I think, would be that's the first one that pops up. My 10th birthday. I really, 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 really wanted a mountain bike, and I was born in January. And so, you get Christmas and you get your birthday in January, so you have to sit on whatever gift is for summer. But my dad, he surprised me with this Diamondback, bright red and black mountain bike that I could definitely grow into. I was a little bit too small for it, but he knew that in 4 or 5 months' time, I'd probably fit just no problem. And what was funny about that was I was a late bloomer when it comes to bike riding. I have horrible balance, and so I was still using training wheels when I was 9, and which was very embarrassing. And I very rarely rode my bike anywhere, but I really wanted this mountain bike for some reason. And he, against his better judgment, said, okay. And that summer, it was June or July by the time everything thawed out and dried out. I took it out one day. Dad said he wasn't putting training wheels on it. I was just going to have to learn how to crash and burn. And at the time, the way that the road was for our neighborhood, we didn't have sidewalks. We had burrow pits or ditches or whatever you want to call them. And so you'd go from my driveway and it would be like a straight down into the hole, and then you'd go for a couple in the sand, and then you'd have to go back up onto the next driveway and down again. And I don't even remember how. It was kind of like that Forrest Gump moment where he's running and all of a sudden the braces fly off and he's now running and he's free and he doesn't look weird running anymore. It kind of felt like that. One minute I'm like teetering, trying to catch my balance, and the next minute I'm just going up and down the borrow pit. And that's the memory that sticks out. I don't know why, but it was kind of a big deal for me, and I never looked back from that moment. I very rarely have problems on a bicycle, but don't get me on ice skates or skis, or I look like Bambi on the ice. It's just pathetic. So. And
as they say, once you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget. So I think that's kind of an interesting topic. And just to play on that a little bit, you talked about ice skating and Bambi on the ice, but I know that you're a huge ice skating fan. Is that right?
I am, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so much so that you travel across the country to go to these ice skating events, don't you?
I do, yeah. Not often because they're crazy expensive, and I have a house now, so I can't just take off and go. I have a mortgage. But yeah, no, I go and I don't shoot for it officially, but it's fun to take pictures and because I go to the big events, they have the TV lights for the cameras. And so it always makes it easier to take pictures and better lighting. So it's something I do for fun. But yeah, I've been a figure skating fan since I was 3 years old. I saw Scott Hamilton, the 1984 Olympic champion. He came up to Alaska to do a show, and he did a backflip right in front of me. And I informed my family that I was going to marry him. And then he went off and married somebody else. And I'm still hurt about it all these years later. But, whatever. I still love him.
Very good. Okay, next one. What do you wish someone would ask you?
I have no idea. I don't know. Hey, do you want me to pay for your trip to Nome next year? That would be a good one right now, because I am trying to figure out if I can make it up for the finish of Iditarod next year. But other than that, I don't know off the top of my head what's a question I would hope somebody asked me. Because, see, that's just a way for conversation to start, and I'm really not a big conversator.
Okay. All right. So that is the end, but I said we would go back to that one that you passed on, and that was who, in terms of a famous person, would you compare yourself to? Did you get some time to think about it? And we can cut it out if there's a pause, of course.
I guess after I said pass and we went on to the next question, the name that popped into my head is Katharine Hepburn, and I do not think I am as amazing as she was and is, even so many years after her passing. But as far as just kind of her going against the norm, going against the grain, she was so very elegant, but she wanted to be the tomboy in Hollywood, and she didn't follow the rule book for a 1940s glam superstar actress. She was very outspoken. She was not even tempered, which I find myself a lot in certain situations. She didn't play the pretty pink princess, and I've never been one of those. I've always been more of a, not necessarily a rough and tumble, but I'm certainly not a pretty pink princess. You never saw me doing ballet. I always wanted to be more on the basketball court or playing ultimate frisbee or flag football, because they wouldn't let girls play tackle football when I was growing up. And so I've always kind of identified with Katharine Hepburn a little bit more than I probably should. But I don't have a Spencer Tracy or anything like that. But as far as just attitude, I think I would compare myself to her.
So there you have it, guys. 10 questions for our co-host of Mushing Radio. So, Tony, how can folks follow along? I know that you have a blog post or a blog site, if you will. I know that you're active on social media. Where can folks find you, follow you, and ask you questions?
Sure. My blog is writersblock.com, REITTER. And then I'm on Twitter, Tony Shell AK, Instagram, Tony Shell, and then Facebook, you can find me, even though I don't actually add friends anymore because I'm getting way too many as it is. I'm not that friendly, guys. I'm not that cool to follow, but I'm also on Facebook as Tony Shell.
So on behalf of my co-host today, this is Robert for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys in just a couple of weeks. We are in the doldrums of the off season, as they say in baseball, the dog days of summer. We're not quite there yet in Alaska, but we're making our way to it. In about a month and a half's time from now, we will have the Iditarod picnic. That will be the first signups. Of course, we'll report on that, and maybe Tony will be boots on the ground there and get us some insider knowledge. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So
I will definitely be there.
She will be there. She will be there with her podcast hat on. So there you go.
I don't know about that. I will eavesdrop, though. I promise to eavesdrop.
Very good. And maybe take some of those pictures as well. So with that, we will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio.